Rain turned to ice against her skin as Mara stumbled through the forest, but it was the pitiful whimper cutting through the thunder that made her forget she was dying. The poison was winning. She could feel it crawling through her blood like liquid fire, turning her limbs heavy and her wolf silent. 3 hours since Marcus had smiled at her across the clearing, since he'd offered her that water skin with honeyed words about forgiveness. 3 hours since she'd realized too late that her former pack would never forgive a wolf who'd witnessed their alpha's crimes. Fool, she thought, catching herself against a tree as her legs buckled. Stupid, trusting fool. The forbidden woods offered no comfort. These ancient trees had stood for centuries, their twisted branches forming a canopy so thick that even the storm's fury felt muted here. Pack law forbade any wolf from entering without permission from the council, but Mara was already dead. What did one more broken rule matter? Another whimper pierced the air, sharper this time. Desperate. Mara's head snapped up despite the agony that movement cost her. Through the sheets of rain, perhaps 50 yards ahead, something gleamed wrong in the darkness. Silver. Her wolf stirred weakly in response, hackles rising at the scent of that cursed metal. But beneath the metallic tang was something else. Pup. Young. Terrified. She should keep walking, should find some hollow to crawl into and let the poison finish its work in peace. That would be the smart thing, the survival thing. 3 months of running alone had taught her that mercy was a luxury rogues couldn't afford. The whimper came again, weaker now. Damn it, Mara breathed, and pushed off the tree. Every step was a negotiation with her failing body. The poison had spread from her stomach to her chest, making each breath a battle. Her vision swam, turning the forest into a watercolour painting of blacks and greys. But she moved forward, driven by something older than logic, older than her own will to live. The silver net hung between 2 trees like some hunter's cruel spider web, and caught in its centre was the most beautiful creature Mara had ever seen. The pup couldn't have been more than 8 weeks old, all oversized paws and soft fur that gleamed like spun gold even in the storm's darkness. Its eyes, pale amber, ancient somehow, despite its age, fixed on her with an intelligence no ordinary pup should possess. Blood matted the golden fur where the silver burned into skin, and the pup had stopped struggling. Its small chest heaving with exhausted breaths. "Oh, little one," Mara whispered, and something in her broken heart cracked further. She knew what silver felt like, knew how it burned wolf flesh, how the pain went beyond physical into something spiritual, severing the connection between human and beast. This pup was suffering in ways that would leave scars, even if it survived. If it survived. Mara's hand shook as she reached for the net. The moment her fingers touched the silver, pain exploded up her arms. It was different from the poison's slow burn. This was immediate, vicious, pure agony that made her wolf howl in anguish inside her dying mind. The silver rejected everything wolf, and she was still wolf enough for it to destroy. But she'd already made her choice. Gritting her teeth until she tasted blood, Mara tore at the net. The silver seared her palms, her fingers, leaving blackened flesh in its wake. Tears mixed with rain on her face as she worked, pulling at the cursed metal with hands that no longer wanted to obey. The pup watched her with those 2 old eyes, silent now, as if it understood what this cost her. The net finally gave way with a metallic shriek. The pup tumbled free, landing in the mud at her feet. "Run!" Mara gasped, falling to her knees. The combination of poison and silver burns had pushed her past her limits. She could feel her wolf dying, feel the human and beast separating in a way that meant the end. "Run, baby. Go home." The pup didn't run. Instead, it limped over to her, pressing its small warm body against her leg. It licked her ruined hands with a whimper that sounded almost like crying. "No," Mara said, her voice breaking. She pushed at the pup weakly. "You have to run. Have to—" The thunder changed. Mara had been a wolf long enough to know the difference between storm and pack. The sound rolling through the forest wasn't weather. It was paws, dozens of them, moving in perfect synchronization. Powerful wolves, trained wolves, hunting in formation. Terror shot through her failing system. If they found her with the pup, if they thought she was the one who'd trapped it. "Go!" She shoved the pup harder, ignoring its yelp of confusion. "Run to them! Run!" The pup finally obeyed, disappearing into the trees with one last backward glance. Mara tried to crawl away, tried to put distance between herself and the pup's location, but her body had given up entirely. She collapsed face first in the mud. The poison and silver burns combining into a symphony of agony that made her welcome the approaching darkness. The thunder of paws grew deafening. Wolves burst from the trees in a semicircle, their eyes glowing in the storm's darkness. Mara had never seen so many powerful wolves in one place. Their presence pressed against her dying senses like a physical weight. Warriors, all of them. Elite guards. And at their center, one wolf that made all the others look small. He was massive, easily twice the size of any wolf Mara had ever encountered. His fur was black as midnight, and when he stepped toward her, the other wolves parted like water. But it was his eyes that trapped her fading attention. Silver, true silver, ancient and knowing, and filled with a power that spoke of centuries rather than decades. Those eyes met hers. And Mara felt the full weight of an Alpha King's attention. She'd heard stories of Kieran Nightshade. Every wolf had. The strongest alpha in 5 generations. The king who'd united the fractured packs through a combination of diplomacy and ruthless strength. They said he could kill with a look, that his wolf was more beast than man, that he'd lost his mate to betrayal and his heart to vengeance. They said he had a son, an heir, a golden pup who would one day inherit a kingdom. The golden cub burst from the trees and ran straight to the massive black wolf, yipping frantically. The king lowered his great head, scenting his son, checking him for injuries with a gentleness that seemed impossible from something so deadly. Then those silver eyes returned to Mara. She tried to speak, tried to explain, but her voice had abandoned her. The poison had reached her heart now. She could feel it stopping, feel her wolf's final desperate struggle to survive. Through dimming vision, she saw the Alpha King shift, his massive form rippling into something even more terrifying. A man who carried his wolf's power like a second skin. He stood over her, this king of wolves, and studied her with an expression she couldn't read. Behind him, his warriors held formation, waiting for their alpha's command. The golden pup, no, the prince, pushed between his father's legs, whimpering at Mara with something that sounded almost like pleading. Kieran Nightshade crouched beside her, close enough that she could see the scars crossing his chest, the silver threading through his black hair at his temples. When he spoke, his voice was rough with disuse, deep as thunder, and touched with something Mara's fading mind identified as wonder. "You saved him." It wasn't a question, but Mara tried to nod anyway. The movement made her vision white out. When the world swam back into focus, the king's hand hovered above her ruined ones, not quite touching. His expression had shifted into something fierce, almost angry. Silver burns, fresh. His jaw clenched. You tore through a silver net to free him. Again, not a question. But this time there was something else in his voice. Disbelief? Maybe respect. The pup whined again, pawing at his father's leg. "She's dying," Kieran said, and Mara wasn't sure if he was talking to his son or his warriors or himself. Poison, wolfsbane and nightshade, mixed with silver dust. Whoever did this wanted her to suffer. He looked up at his guards, his face hardening into something that promised death. "Find who did this. Find them and bring them to me alive." Wolves melted into the forest. The king's attention returned to Mara, and she saw something in those silver eyes that terrified her more than dying. Calculation. Decision. A king's judgment. "You used your last strength to save my son," he said softly, almost to himself. "You, a rogue with death in your veins, chose mercy over survival." His hand moved to her throat, checking her slowing pulse. "What's your name?" Mara," she managed, blood on her lips. "Nobody." "Nobody," he repeated and smiled, a terrible, beautiful expression that transformed his harsh face. "Not anymore." He bit his own wrist, hard enough to draw blood, and Mara's fading mind screamed a warning too late as he pressed the wound to her mouth. Alpha blood. Ancient blood. The most powerful healing agent in the wolf world, and forbidden to share outside of pack bonds. "Drink," Kieran commanded. And it wasn't a request. It was an alpha's order, one that bypassed her dying will and went straight to her wolf's most basic instincts. Mara drank, and the world exploded into silver fire. Chapter 2. She woke to silk sheets and the scent of pine, and the Alpha King sitting in shadows, watching her with eyes that promised both salvation and danger. For a moment, Mara thought she was dead. The afterlife she'd always imagined would feel like this, soft and painless, wrapped in luxury she'd never known in life. But then her fingers flexed against Egyptian cotton that cost more than she'd earned in a year, and pain bloomed through her palms in sharp reminder that she was very much live. The memories hit next: the storm, the golden cub, the silver net tearing through her hands, the massive black wolf with ancient eyes, and blood, his blood, forced past her lips as darkness claimed her. Alpha blood. Mara's eyes snapped fully open, her wolf surging to alertness inside her mind. The room around her was enormous, easily the size of her entire childhood home. Moonlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating furnishings that spoke of wealth and power. Hand-carved mahogany furniture, tapestries that looked centuries old, a fireplace large enough to stand in. The bed she occupied could have fit 5 wolves comfortably. This wasn't a guest room, this was a statement. "Your heart rate just spiked," a voice said from the shadows, deep and calm. "Interesting." Most wolves take several minutes to fully orient themselves after healing sleep. You snap to awareness in seconds. Mara's head turned toward the sound, her wolf's instincts screaming warnings. In a high-backed chair positioned between her and the door sat Alpha King Kieran Nightshade, bathed in shadow, utterly still. He wore simple black clothing that somehow emphasized rather than diminished his power, and those silver eyes, unchanged from his wolf form, studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Where am I?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "The Crescent Moon Palace, my home." He leaned forward slightly, and moonlight caught the sharp angles of his face. He was perhaps in his mid-30s, though with wolves of his power it was impossible to tell. Everything about him spoke of leashed violence, the breadth of his shoulders, the scars visible at his collar, the way he held himself with the absolute certainty of a predator who'd never met his equal. More specifically, you're in the East Wing, in chambers that haven't been used in 5 years. My beta insisted you belong in the dungeons. I disagreed. Mara's hands moved instinctively to her throat, expecting to find the poison's damage. Instead, her skin was smooth, unmarked. She looked at her palms next, where the silver burn should have left permanent scars. Nothing. Just pale, unblemished skin. "Your healers are skilled," she said carefully, "the best in 4 kingdoms." Kieran rose from the chair with fluid grace, and Mara's wolf whined nervously as he approached the bed. He moved like water, like smoke, like death given form. "They worked on you for 3 days. The poison alone should have killed you twice over. Wolfsbane, Nightshade, and Silver Dust is a particularly vicious combination. The silver burns complicated things. You were close enough to death that my pack physician asked if she should prepare your body for burning. 3 days. Mara's mind raced. 3 days unconscious in an Alpha King's palace, completely vulnerable. But you lived. He stopped at the foot of her bed, hands clasped behind his back. My blood is potent enough to counter almost any poison, and your will to survive was impressive. My healers said you fought for life even in unconsciousness, your wolf refusing to give up. His head tilted slightly. Tell me, Mara Nobody, what drives a dying rogue to cling so desperately to life? The way he said her name, the one she'd given him in what she'd thought were her final moments, made something tighten in her chest. There was too much knowledge in his gaze, too much calculation. This was a king who'd built an empire through reading people, through seeing past lies to truth. Stubbornness, she said, which was true enough. I don't like losing. A smile ghosted across his lips, there and gone. Neither do I. He moved around the bed, and every instinct Mara had screamed at her to run, to fight, to do anything but lie still as this apex predator circled her. Which brings us to several interesting questions. First, how did you come to be in the Forbidden Woods? Second, why was a dying rogue willing to destroy her own hands to save a pup she didn't know? And third, he stopped level with her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the pine and snow that clung to his skin. Why does your scent carry traces of the Shadowfang pack? Mara's blood turned to ice. I see you understand the gravity of that question. Kieran's voice remained conversational, but something dangerous flickered in those silver eyes. The Shadowfang pack has been at war with my kingdom for 30 years. They've killed my wolves, attacked my territory, and 3 days before you appeared in my forest, someone from that pack orchestrated the kidnapping of my son. So you can imagine my beta's concern when he identified your scent. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the panic clawing at her throat. Marcus, Beta Marcus of the Shadowfang pack, had orchestrated the kidnapping. Her former pack had taken the prince. I'm not, her voice cracked. I haven't been part of that pack for 3 months. A rogue then, recently exiled. His eyes narrowed. Or perhaps a spy, sent to infiltrate my territory and finish what your pack started. No. The word came out fierce, strengthened by desperation. I'm not a spy. I left that pack. She cut herself off, the words dying on her tongue. To tell him the truth meant revealing everything, meant admitting what she'd seen, what she knew. It meant painting a target not just on her back, but on her soul. What? Kieran leaned closer, and Mara caught her breath as his power pressed against her, an alpha's dominance that demanded submission, demanded truth. Finish that sentence, Mara. They tried to kill me, she whispered, the confession torn from her against her will. I saw something I shouldn't have. Learned something that made me a liability, so they poisoned me and left me to die in the woods. Silence fell between them, heavy as stone. Kieran studied her face with an intensity that felt like he was peeling back layers, seeing past flesh to the truth beneath. When he finally spoke, his voice had softened fractionally. What did you see? I can't. Mara's hands fisted in the silk sheets. If I tell you, they'll kill me for certain. They'll hunt me to the ends of the earth. They already tried to kill you. Kieran straightened, putting a careful distance between them. And you're in my territory now, under my protection. Whatever you saw, whatever threat you represent to them, you're my problem now, not theirs. Before Mara could respond, the door burst open with a force that made her jump. A man strode in, radiating fury and power barely leashed. He was nearly as tall as Kieran, built like a warrior, with dark hair and eyes that glowed amber with his wolf's presence. The beta, Mara realized, and he looked ready to tear her throat out. This is unconscionable, the man snarled, not bothering with pleasantries. Kieran, she carries the Shadowfang scent. She appeared in our territory at the exact time your son was taken. The connection is obvious. Marcus, Kieran's voice carried a warning. I told you I would handle this. Handle this? Marcus's laugh was bitter. You brought an enemy into the palace, into the royal wing, and you expect me to simply trust your judgment? My job is to protect you, to protect this pack. She needs to be in chains, not silk sheets. Your job, Kieran said, his voice dropping to something cold and absolute, is to obey your alpha. I suggest you remember that. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet. Marcus's jaw worked, his wolf clearly fighting his control. But he took a step back. The submission was grudging but real. She saved Ash, Kieran continued, his tone brooking no argument. Used her dying strength to free him from a silver net. Suffered burns that would have crippled a lesser wolf. That earns her protection under pack law, regardless of her origins. Protection? Marcus's attention swung back to Mara, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. Or manipulation? Maybe she's the one who set the trap in the first place. What better way to gain your trust than to rescue the prince from a situation she orchestrated? Mara wanted to argue, wanted to defend herself, but the accusation wasn't entirely unreasonable. She would have thought the same thing in his position. The timing doesn't work, Kieran said, surprising her. According to our trackers, that silver net was placed at least 6 hours before Mara entered the Forbidden Woods. She was already dying from poison when she found Ash. There's no way she could have set the trap. Then she's working with someone, Marcus insisted. The Shadowfang pack doesn't work alone. They have allies, spies. Enough. The single word cracked like a whip, and even Mara felt compelled to silence. Kieran's power filled the room, pressing against them with the weight of absolute authority. I have made my decision. Mara stays under my protection until we determine the truth of her situation. You will treat her with the respect due any wolf under my care. Is that understood? Marcus's face went tight with frustration, but he nodded. Yes, Alpha. Good. Now leave us. I have more questions for our guest. The beta shot Mara one last look that promised he'd be watching, waiting for her to slip up, then turned on his heel and stalked from the room. The door closed behind him with slightly more force than necessary. Kieran exhaled slowly, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Marcus is protective. He lost his sister to a Shadowfang raid 10 years ago. The wound is still fresh. He's right to suspect me, Mara said quietly. In his position, I'd want me locked up too. Perhaps. Kieran moved to the windows, staring out at the moonlit grounds. But I've spent 30 years at war, Mara. I've learned to read enemies and allies, to sense deception and truth. When I look at you, I don't see a threat. He paused, his jaw tightening. I see someone running from something worse than death. The accuracy of that statement stole her breath. The Shadowfang Alpha, Kieran continued, still gazing out the window, is a wolf named Jonathan Reeves, ambitious, cunning, and utterly without honor. He's been trying to overthrow my kingdom for decades, using guerrilla tactics and political maneuvering when he couldn't win through direct confrontation. Is he the one you're running from? Mara's silence was answer enough. Kieran turned from the window, his silver eyes finding hers across the room. What did you learn that made you a liability? She could tell him, could unburden herself of the weight she'd been carrying alone for 3 months. But to speak those words meant condemning herself. If Jonathan discovered she'd revealed his secrets, he would stop at nothing to silence her permanently. And now she knew his beta Marcus had kidnapped the prince. The conspiracy ran deeper than she'd imagined. She started, then froze as a sound came from the hallway outside, scratching, small paws on marble. A moment later, the door nudged open and a golden blur shot into the room with a delighted yip. Prince Ash, no longer burned or traumatized, bounded across the floor and launched himself at Mara's bed with all the grace of a puppy who hadn't quite figured out his own legs yet. Ash, no, Kieran started, but the young prince had already landed on the mattress, his tail wagging so hard his entire body shook. He pressed his wet nose against Mara's hand. whining with joy. His pale amber eyes bright with recognition and affection. Despite everything, the fear, the uncertainty, the danger, Mara felt herself smile. She reached out tentatively, running her fingers through his soft golden fur. The pup practically melted, rolling onto his back to expose his belly in the ultimate gesture of trust. "He's been impossible since you arrived," Kieran said. And there was something warm in his voice now, something almost fond. "The healers tried to keep him away while they worked on you, but he kept escaping his nursemaids. He'd scratch at your door, whining until someone let him check on you. My physician said he slept outside your chambers every night." Mara's throat tightened. "He remembers me. More than that." Kieran approached the bed again, watching his son with an expression of wonder and concern. "He's bonded with you? At his age, that's unusual. Pups don't form attachments this strong to anyone outside their immediate family." As if to prove his father's point, Ash crawled closer to Mara, curling against her side with a contented sigh. His small body radiated warmth and trust, and something in Mara's chest cracked at the innocence of it. "I can't take him from you," Kieran said quietly. "I've tried. He howls as if his heart is breaking. Whatever happened in those woods, whatever you did to save him, he knows you gave everything for him. He won't forget that." He sat on the edge of the bed, his hand moving to stroke his son's head. "Neither will I." Their eyes met over the sleeping pup, and Mara felt something shift in the air between them. A connection, subtle but undeniable, pulling at something deep in her chest. She saw Kieran's nostrils flare slightly, saw his eyes widen fractionally. "That's impossible," he breathed, so quietly she almost missed it. "What is?" But Kieran was already standing, putting distance between them with movements that looked almost panicked. His hand rose to his chest, pressing against his heart as if it pained him. "Nothing," he said, but his voice had roughened. "You should rest. Tomorrow we'll discuss your situation further, determine what's to be done." "Am I a prisoner?" Mara asked directly. Kieran paused at the door, his back to her. "You're under my protection. Whether that feels like freedom or captivity will depend on the choices you make." He looked back over his shoulder, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "Choose wisely, Mara. The truth will come out eventually. It always does. Better it comes from you willingly than extracted by force." He left without another word, the door closing with a soft click. Mara sat in the sudden silence, Ash warm and trusting against her side, her mind spinning. She was trapped in the palace of the Alpha King, suspected by his beta, protected by a life debt that felt more like a leash. Her former pack had kidnapped Kieran's son. She knew secrets that could topple kingdoms. And now there was something else, something she'd seen in Kieran's eyes before he fled the room. Fear, recognition, and hunger. She knew that look, had seen it once before, years ago, when her childhood friend had found his fated mate. That moment of discovery, of the universe clicking into place, of knowing your soul had found its other half. But that was impossible. Kieran Nightshade had already lost his fated mate. Everyone knew the story. His mate had died 5 years ago, betrayed and murdered by enemies. The grief had nearly destroyed him. Wolves only got one mate in a lifetime, one soul bond, one chance at that perfect connection. You couldn't have two. Mara's hand moved to her own chest, pressing against the space above her heart where something new had taken root. Something that pulsed in rhythm with another heartbeat somewhere in this vast palace. Something that whispered of pine and snow and silver eyes. "This is a problem," she murmured to the sleeping pup. Ash snored in response, utterly unconcerned with the impossible complications of fate. Outside her windows, the moon hung full and heavy. And Mara couldn't shake the feeling that her life, already irrevocably changed, was about to become infinitely more complicated. She'd saved a prince and earned a king's protection. but she'd also somehow triggered something that shouldn't exist. A second mate bond, and in a palace full of enemies and secrets, where one wrong word could mean her death, that might be the most dangerous truth of all. Chapter 3. The ancient priestess's words echoed through the throne room. The golden wolf was never the target. They wanted someone desperate enough to die for him. Mara stood in the shadows at the back of the grand hall, her wrists bound in silver-threaded rope that burned just enough to remind her she was a prisoner in all but name. 4 days had passed since she'd woken in silk sheets, and each day had brought new complications, new suspicions, new reasons for the palace wolves to view her as a threat. The blood moon ceremony had begun at midnight, as tradition demanded. The throne room, a cavernous space of white marble and ancient stone, was packed with wolves from across the kingdom. Pack leaders, council members, warriors and nobles all gathered to witness the ritual that would supposedly reveal the truth of Prince Ash's kidnapping. At the centre of the room stood Priestess Celeste, a woman so old her hair had gone silver white and her eyes had faded to the colour of milk. But her power was undeniable, crackling through the air like electricity, making Mara's wolf pace nervously behind her ribs. Blood calls to blood, Celeste chanted, her voice stronger than her frail body suggested. Truth buried rises. Lies spoken crumble. By the blood moon's light, I compel the threads of fate to show us what was hidden. She stood within an elaborate circle of symbols drawn in red powder, blood mixed with ash from the sacred trees. In her gnarled hands, she held a silver bowl containing 3 drops of Prince Ash's blood, freely given. The young prince watched from his father's lap on the throne, unusually solemn for a pup his age, as if he understood the gravity of what was happening. Kieran sat rigid on his throne, every inch the Alpha King. He wore formal regalia, black leather and silver chains that marked his station, and his expression revealed nothing. But Mara had learned to read the subtle signs of his tension. The white-knuckled grip on his throne's arms, the muscle ticking in his jaw, the way his silver eyes tracked her constantly. As if he couldn't help himself. That connection between them had only grown stronger. Even now, standing 30 feet away in a room packed with wolves, she could feel him. The phantom touch of his awareness on her skin, the way her heartbeat wanted to synchronize with his, the pull that made her wolf whine with the need to move closer. It was agony. It was impossible, and they both knew it. The blood moon sees all, Celeste continued, sprinkling ash into the bowl. The mixture began to glow with an eerie red light that cast dancing shadows across the throne room. Show us the ones who conspired. Show us the hands that stole the prince. Show us the truth written in blood and bone. The light from the bowl exploded outward, and suddenly images flickered in the air like ghosts given form. Mara watched, her throat tight with dread, as the magical projection showed the forbidden woods on the night of the storm. She saw the silver net being hung between the trees, saw gloved hands, impossible to identify, placing the trapped golden pup in its centre, saw Prince Ash crying, burning, suffering. The crowd murmured with anger and grief. On the throne, Kieran's expression turned murderous. But the vision didn't stop. It rewound, showing the moments before. Mara watched in growing horror as the scene revealed not one kidnapper, but 3, their faces hidden by hoods. They moved with military precision, working together to subdue the young prince during what should have been a supervised outing with his nursemaids. The nursemaids lay dead in the grass, their throats torn out. Murderers, someone hissed from the crowd. The vision shifted again, moving forward. It showed the conspirators hiding in the trees, waiting, watching. And then, Mara stumbled into frame, dying, poisoned, barely able to walk. The crowd's attention swiveled to her like a physical blow. She felt the weight of their stares, their suspicion, their fury. But the vision continued. It showed her destroying her hands to free Ash, showed her collapsing, showed the conspirators retreating into the forest as Kieran and his warriors arrived. And just before the vision faded, it showed something else. One of the hooded figures pulling back their cowl just enough to speak into a communication device, a female voice barely audible. The bait is set. She took it exactly as predicted. The throne room erupted. She's part of it. The rogue was working with them. Execute her now. Mara's blood turned to ice. Her mind reeled, trying to make sense of what she'd just seen. Bait? She was the bait, but that meant silence. Kieran's command cracked through the chaos like thunder, and every wolf in the room fell instantly quiet. He rose from his throne with lethal grace, his power rolling through the space in waves that made weaker wolves drop their eyes in submission. Priestess, explain. Celeste studied the dissipating magic with troubled eyes. The kidnapping was never meant to succeed, Alpha King. The conspirators knew you would track your son, knew you would find whoever saved him. The entire event was orchestrated to bring someone specific into your palace, someone desperate enough, brave enough, or foolish enough to sacrifice themselves for a pup they didn't know. Me, Mara whispered, her voice lost in the vastness of the room. But Kieran heard. His eyes found hers across the crowd, and the intensity there made her breath catch. Why? Marcus demanded, stepping forward. He'd been standing near the throne, ever the vigilant baiter. And now, his attention fixed on Mara like a predator scenting prey. What makes her special? What do they want with her inside our walls? That, Celeste said slowly, is what we must discover. But I sensed something else, something the ritual revealed. She turned her milky eyes toward Mara, and despite her blindness, Mara felt seen, truly seen, in a way that made her want to run. The rogue carries secrets in her blood, secrets even she doesn't know. The crowd began murmuring again, but Kieran silenced them with a raised hand. Then we find answers. Marcus, take Mara to the... No. The word came from Kieran's own lips, surprising even him. His jaw clenched, and Mara watched as he waged some internal battle. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. She stays under my direct supervision, in the royal wing, with guards at her door. Kieran, Marcus started, disbelief colouring his tone. That's an order, Beta. Kieran's eyes flashed silver. If someone went to this much trouble to plant her in my palace, I want to know why, and I want her where I can watch her personally. The possessiveness in those words made Mara's wolf purr, even as her human mind screamed warnings. This was dangerous. This connection between them was growing beyond control, and every wolf in this room with any sensitivity could probably feel it crackling in the air. The ceremony is concluded, Kieran announced, his tone brooking no argument. Council members, remain. Everyone else is dismissed. The crowd began to disperse, but not before Mara caught the looks thrown her way. Fear, hatred, suspicion. She was condemned in their eyes, guilty by association with a conspiracy she didn't understand. Guards appeared at her elbows, not roughly, but firmly, and began escorting her from the throne room. As she passed the priestess, the old woman's hand shot out with surprising speed, grasping Mara's wrist. The blood moon shows what is hidden, Celeste whispered, her sightless eyes somehow boring into Mara's. Tonight, when the moon reaches its peak, you will see. You will remember, and you will understand why they fear you. Then she released Mara's wrist and the guards pulled her away. The hours until Moonpeak passed with agonizing slowness. Mara paced her luxurious prison, her mind spinning with questions that had no answers. Who had orchestrated this? What did they want with her? And why did the priestess's words fill her with a dread that went bone deep? Prince Ash had been brought to her room an hour ago, the young pup refusing to sleep anywhere else. He dozed now on her bed, occasionally whimpering in his dreams. Mara found herself drawn to him repeatedly, checking that he was safe, that he was real. The golden wolf was never the target. She was. But why? As midnight approached, Mara felt it, a pulling sensation, like hooks in her chest drawing her toward the windows. The blood moon hung heavy in the sky, enormous and red as fresh spilled blood. Its light seemed to pierce through glass and stone, seeking her out specifically. Her head began to pound. Images flashed behind her eyes, not memories, but something else. Something that felt like remembering and discovering simultaneously. She saw a white wolf running through snow, blood on its muzzle, victory and grief warring in its ancient eyes. She saw a massacre, bodies everywhere, a pack torn apart, and at the center of it all, a woman with pale hair fighting with a ferocity that defied nature. She saw Kieran, younger but no less powerful, cradling someone in his arms as she died. A woman with Mara's face, Mara's eyes, but not Mara. Someone else wearing her features like a mask. The vision shifted, and suddenly Mara was that woman, feeling her emotions, living her final moments. She felt the betrayal like a knife between her ribs, felt the poison burning through her veins, wolfsbane, nightshade and silver dust. Felt herself dying in her mate's arms. "I'm sorry," the woman whispered with Mara's voice. "I should have been stronger, should have seen the betrayal before." "Don't," Kieran's face, younger and destroyed by grief. "Don't leave me. Please, we can fight this. My blood, take my blood. Won't work. This poison, designed specifically for me, for us." Her hand pressed against his chest over his heart. "Promise me. Promise you'll find happiness again. That you'll let yourself love. There's only you. Only ever you. Then I condemn you to loneliness." She smiled through tears. "And I'm too selfish for that. Promise me, Kieran. Promise me you'll open your heart if fate gives you another chance." "I promise." He lied, and they both knew it. Mara gasped back to awareness, finding herself on her knees on the floor, tears streaming down her face. Her heart ached with grief that wasn't hers, mourned a death she hadn't died. But those memories, they felt real. More real than her own past, which suddenly seemed foggy and indistinct when she tried to examine it closely. A knock at the door made her jump. She scrambled to her feet, wiping her face, as the door opened to reveal Kieran himself. He stepped inside, dismissing the guards with a gesture, then closed the door behind him. They stared at each other across the room, and Mara saw that he was suffering too. His skin had gone pale, his breathing was shallow, and his hands clenched at his sides, as if restraining himself from reaching for her. "You felt it," he said. "Not a question. The blood moon, it's showing you something." "Memories that aren't mine." Mara's voice shook. "I saw her. Your mate. I felt her dying." "Kieran. What's happening to me?" He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping just short of touching her. This close, the mate bond screamed at them both, demanding completion, demanding acknowledgement. Mara could see him fighting it, loyalty to his dead mate warring with the undeniable pull of what fate was trying to weave between them. "I don't know," he admitted, and the vulnerability in those words broke something in her. This shouldn't be possible. Serafina died 5 years ago. I felt the mate bond sever, felt part of my soul die with her. You can't have 2 mates. The moon goddess doesn't work that way. "Then what am I?" Mara demanded, frustration and fear making her voice sharp. "What are we?" Kieran's hand rose, hovering near her face but not quite touching. "I've been investigating your past. Marcus found records. You were a warrior in the Shadowfang pack, high-ranking, trusted, but your service only goes back 3 years. Before that, nothing. No birth records, no family history, nothing. It's as if you didn't exist before 3 years ago." The words hit Mara like a physical blow. She tried to remember her childhood, her early life, and found only vague impressions. Fragments that dissolved like smoke when she reached for them. "That's impossible," she whispered. But even as she said it, doubt crept in. I remember training, serving in the pack. I remember. What? Kieran pressed. What do you remember specifically? Names, faces, moments? Mara opened her mouth to answer and found nothing concrete. Just blurred images, indistinct voices, a life that felt more like a story she'd been told than one she'd lived. Oh, gods, she breathed, her legs going weak. Kieran caught her automatically, his hands burning where they gripped her arms. The contact sent electricity arcing between them, and they both gasped at the intensity. He steadied her, then forced himself to step back, putting distance between them even though it clearly caused him physical pain. Mara saw him press a hand to his chest, over his heart, his face twisted with agony. The mate bond, she said softly. It hurts you when we're apart. It hurts me when we're together, he corrected roughly. It hurts me to breathe the same air as you. Do you understand? I loved Serafina with everything I am. I would have died for her. I wanted to die with her. And now fate is trying to give me you, and I don't. His voice broke. I don't know if I can survive loving and losing again. Tears burned Mara's eyes. I'm not asking you to love me, aren't you? His silver eyes found hers, blazing with something fierce and desperate. Because every time I look at you, I see her face, her eyes, her smile, and then I see you, different, unique, yourself. And I want you anyway. Want you despite the impossibility, despite the betrayal it feels like to her memory. Want you even though everything about this is wrong. A sound from the bed made them both turn. Ash had woken, his amber eyes moving between them with surprising wisdom for one so young. He yipped softly, then trotted over to press against Mara's legs while keeping one paw on his father's boot, physically connecting them as if to say, together. You belong together. Even my son knows, Kieran said, with something that might have been a laugh if it weren't so broken. Even he can sense what I'm trying to deny. Before Mara could respond, her vision swam again. The blood moon's power surged through her, and suddenly she wasn't in her chambers anymore. She stood in a laboratory, cold and clinical. Wolves in white coats surrounded a table where a woman lay strapped and unconscious. A woman with pale hair and features that could have been Mara's reflection. The suppression spell is holding, one of them said. Her memories are completely rewritten. As far as she knows, she's always been Mara Thorne, loyal warrior of the Shadow Fang Pack. And her power? Another asked, locked away. She'll never know what she really is, what she can do. Alpha Jonathan's orders were explicit. Keep her alive, but neutralized. The priestess's prophecy was clear. If Serafina's power ever awakens in another vessel, it could destroy us all. Good, then the plan proceeds. In 3 years, when the time is right, we'll activate her. Use her to infiltrate the Crescent Moon Palace. The Alpha King will never see it coming. How could he suspect someone wearing his dead mate's face? The vision shattered, and Mara crashed back to reality, gasping. But something had changed. She felt it immediately. A dam breaking inside her mind, memories flooding back in a torrent that made her cry out. She remembered the laboratory, remembered the spell being cast, remembered her real life before they stole it, a life that made no sense, that shouldn't be possible. Because before she was Mara, before the suppression spell, before 3 years of false memories, she had been someone else entirely. No, she whispered, staggering backward. No, that can't be. Mara? Kieran moved toward her, alarmed. What did you see? But she was drowning in revelation, in truth too terrible to speak. The rogue attack that had poisoned her. It hadn't been Jonathan trying to kill her for discovering his treason. It had been the suppression spell breaking down. Her true memories trying to resurface, and Jonathan's desperate attempt to kill her before she remembered everything, before she remembered who she really was. I'm not who I think I am, Mara said, her voice hollow with shock. She looked up at Kieran, saw him swimming in her tear-blurred vision. The past 3 years, my whole life as Mara Thorne, it was implanted. False. They used magic to rewrite my memories, to make me someone else. Someone loyal to the Shadowfang Pack, someone who could be manipulated, used as a weapon. Kieran had gone very still, his alpha's mind clearly working through the implications. Who were you before? I don't know yet. The memories are coming back in pieces. Mara pressed her hands to her temples, trying to make sense of the fragmenting chaos in her mind. But I know this. I'm connected to your mate somehow, to Seraphina. They said her power could awaken in another vessel, that I was that vessel. The colour drained from Kieran's face. That's impossible. When a wolf dies, their power dies with them. It doesn't transfer, doesn't reincarnate. Unless it was never truly hers to begin with. The voice came from the doorway, and they both spun to find Priestess Celeste standing there, leaning on a staff. Her milky eyes somehow seeing everything. Unless the power you thought was your mate's was only borrowed. Held in trust until the true heir was ready to claim it. What are you talking about? Kieran demanded. Celeste entered the room slowly, her attention fixed on Mara with an intensity that made her want to hide. Seraphina was special, yes? More powerful than any wolf of her generation? Able to do things that shouldn't be possible, heal with a touch, sense truth in lies, command lesser wolves without being an alpha? Yes, Kieran said carefully. She never understood why. Her bloodline was strong, but not exceptional. We always assumed it was a gift from the moon goddess. Not a gift, Celeste corrected, a burden. She was a vessel, chosen to protect a power too dangerous to leave unguarded. And when she died, that power had to go somewhere. Had to find a new host. Her staff pointed at Mara. Had to find her. Mara felt sick. But I'm not, I can't be. Can't you? Celeste tilted her head. Tell me, child, when you saved the prince, destroying your hands on silver that should have killed you, how did you survive? When you drank the Alpha King's blood and it healed poison that should have been untouchable, how did you live? You're not just lucky. You're not just strong. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You're something far more dangerous. And now, thanks to the blood moon, you're starting to remember what that is. The room spun. Mara's legs gave out, and this time when Kieran caught her, he didn't let go. He held her against his chest, his heartbeat thundering against her ear, and she felt his wolf reaching for hers. Instinctively, protectively. Despite everything. What do we do? Kieran asked the priestess, his voice rough. We wait, Celeste said simply. The blood moon has begun the awakening. By dawn, she will remember everything. And then, Alpha King, you will have to decide, is she your enemy or your salvation? Your greatest threat or your second chance at love? She turned and left, her cryptic words hanging in the air like smoke. Kieran and Mara stayed frozen, wrapped around each other, while outside the blood moon reached its peak. And in the deepest parts of Mara's fractured mind, buried memories stirred and stretched and began to claw their way toward the surface, bringing with them truths that would shatter everything she thought she knew. The Golden Wolf was never the target. They wanted someone desperate enough to die for him. They wanted her in the palace, close to Kieran, positioned perfectly for whatever plan they'd spent 3 years orchestrating. And now, as false memories crumbled and true ones emerged, Mara was terrified to discover exactly what weapon they'd tried to make her into, and whether she was already too late to stop it. Chapter 4. You're not just my mate, Kieran growled, backing her against the wall, his control fracturing. You're her. You're wearing my dead mate's face, her scent, her soul, and I don't know whether to kill you or claim you. Dawn had broken an hour ago, but Mara hadn't seen it. She'd spent the night drowning in memories that weren't hers. Or were they? She didn't know anymore. Didn't know where Mara ended and Selene began, or if there had ever been a Mara at all. She remembered dying. remembered the poison burning through her veins while Kieran held her, his face wet with tears, his desperate pleas echoing in her ears. Remembered her last breath leaving her body, the mate bond severing like a rope snapping, the feeling of her soul being torn in half. And then, nothing. Darkness. Void. Until suddenly there was light again, and consciousness, and she was waking up in a laboratory with wolves in white coats standing over her, telling her she was Mara Thorne, that she'd always been Mara Thorne, that she was a loyal warrior of the Shadowfang pack. But that had been the lie. The truth was so much worse. Now Kieran had her pinned against the wall of her chambers, his hands bracketing her head, his body so close she could feel the heat radiating from him. His silver eyes blazed with something wild and desperate, grief, fury, longing and a hunger that made her wolf-keen with need. "Say something," he demanded, his voice raw. "Tell me you're not her. Tell me this is some trick, some cruel magic meant to destroy me. Tell me anything but the truth the royal witch just confirmed." Mara's throat worked, but no sound came out. What could she say? How could she explain that she was both and neither? That she had Selene's soul, but Mara's experiences. That she remembered loving him with everything she was, but also remembered 3 years of never knowing he existed? "I don't know what I am," she finally whispered, and watched something break in his eyes. His forehead dropped to hers, and the contact sent electricity arcing through her entire body. The mate bond sang between them, recognition and completion and rightness that transcended logic or law or impossibility. "The royal witch says you're Selene reborn," Kieran said against her skin, his breath hot and ragged. "That someone used forbidden magic to take your soul after death and implant it in a new body. That they manipulated your memories, suppressed your power, made you into someone else. And then they waited. 3 years they waited. For the perfect moment to send you back to me. Why?" Mara's hands had found his chest without her permission, feeling his heart hammering beneath her palms. Why go to such lengths? What do they want? That's what we need to find out. Kieran straightened, stepping back, and the loss of contact made them both grimace with pain. "But first, we have a more immediate problem. The reincarnation magic used on you, it's forbidden under ancient law, has been for centuries. Ever since the Dark Wars when necromancers tried to create immortal armies. The penalty for using it is death." Ice flooded Mara's veins. "For the caster or the victim?" "Both." His face had gone hard, the Alpha King replacing the grieving mate. "The law is explicit. Any wolf created through reincarnation magic must be executed, regardless of their innocence in the matter. It's considered an abomination against the natural order, against the moon goddess herself. Then I'm already dead." Mara's laugh came out broken. "I survived poison and silver and 3 years of false memories, only to be executed for something I didn't even know was done to me." "No." The word came out sharp as a blade. Kieran's power flooded the room, making the windows rattle. "I won't allow it. I didn't survive losing you once, only to lose you again because of some ancient law written by wolves who are dust and memory." "You can't," Mara started, but he cut her off. "I'm the Alpha King. I can do whatever I damn well please." His eyes blazed. "Let the council try to stop me. Let them try to take you from me again. I'll burn this entire kingdom to ash before I let anyone hurt you." The fierce protectiveness in his voice should have comforted her. Instead, it terrified her. Because she'd seen in Selene's memories what happened when Kieran went dark, when grief and rage stripped away his careful control. She'd seen the aftermath of battles where he'd lost himself to his wolf's fury, seen the bodies left behind. "That's exactly what they want," she said softly, and watched understanding dawn in his eyes. "Don't you see? They didn't bring me back to destroy you with happiness. They brought me back to destroy you with impossible choices, to make you choose between your kingdom and your mate, between law and love, between duty and desire. A knock at the door interrupted them. Kieran snarled a curse but stepped further back, composing himself with visible effort. "Enter." The door opened to reveal the royal witch, Evangeline, a striking woman with silver hair and eyes that swirled with magical power. She swept into the room with 3 attendants behind her, all carrying various mystical implements. "Alpha King," she said with a slight bow. "I've completed the full analysis you requested. The findings are troubling." "Tell me." Kieran's voice was clipped, controlled. Evangeline's attention moved to Mara, and there was something like pity in her gaze. "The magic used to create her reincarnation is old, older than the Dark Wars, older than the founding of the kingdoms. It's moon magic, pure and ancient, the kind that shouldn't exist outside of the goddess's own domain. Which means," Kieran pressed, "which means whoever orchestrated this had access to divine power." Evangeline began setting up her implements, crystals, herbs, ancient texts. They didn't just perform forbidden magic, they stole power directly from the moon goddess herself, and that level of sacrilege. She shook her head. "It suggests we're dealing with someone far more dangerous than simple conspirators." Mara felt sick. "What happens to me? To my soul, I mean? Am I really Selene? Or am I just some construct wearing her memories? That's what I need to determine." Evangeline gestured to a chair she'd had her attendants place in the center of the room. "The ritual will be uncomfortable, but not harmful. It will allow me to see the truth of your essence, the core of what makes you you. May I proceed?" Mara looked at Kieran, who nodded almost imperceptibly. She took the seat, her heart hammering. Evangeline began to chant in the old language, the words making Mara's skin prickle with power. The witch moved around her in a slow circle, sprinkling herbs and tracing symbols in the air that glowed with pale light. The crystals she'd placed around the chair began to hum, resonating with some frequency that Mara felt in her bones. Then Evangeline placed both hands on Mara's temples, and the world exploded into light. Mara saw herself, all of herself. She saw Selene, beautiful and powerful, raised in a noble pack, trained in the old ways. She saw Selene meeting Kieran, the instant recognition of the mate bond, the love that had consumed them both. She saw their mating ceremony, their years together, the joy and the passion and the partnership. And she saw Selene's death, not as she'd remembered it before, but the truth of it. Saw the betrayal, saw the poison administered not in battle, but at a formal dinner. Saw the wolf she'd trusted smiling as they told her she was dying, that Kieran would follow soon after. "Your mate is too powerful," the wolf had whispered, "too dangerous. The council has decided he must fall, and you, dear Selene, are the key to his destruction. He'll never recover from losing you, never be strong enough to defend his throne. And when he's weak, we'll strike." But the vision didn't stop there. It showed what came after. Selene's soul being caught before it could move on, trapped in magical bindings, held in stasis while wolves in white coats worked dark magic. She saw her essence being extracted, purified, prepared for implantation. And she saw the moment they placed her soul in a new body, a shell they'd grown specifically for this purpose, blank and empty and waiting. Saw the memories being written into her mind, layer by layer, creating the fiction of Mara Thorne. But there was something else, something the conspirators hadn't counted on. The soul rejected the false memories. Deep down, beyond conscious thought, Selene fought. And slowly, over 3 years, the true self had begun to crack through the facade. Small rebellions, refusing certain orders, questioning authority, helping those the pack was meant to oppress, until finally the real memories began to surface, and Jonathan had panicked, trying to kill her before she remembered everything. Evangeline pulled her hands back, breaking the connection. Mara gasped, returning to her body with a jolt that made her dizzy. "Well?" Kieran demanded, moving closer. "What did you see?" "She's Selene," Evangeline said quietly. Not a copy, not a construct. Her actual soul, bound to a new form. The magic that created this is beyond anything I've encountered, but it's genuine. She is your mate, reborn. The words hung in the air like a death sentence and a benediction all at once. That means the law applies, someone said from the doorway, and Mara's blood turned to ice as she recognized Beta Marcus's voice. He entered with several guards, his expression hard and unforgiving. Ancient law is explicit, Kieran. Reincarnation magic is forbidden. The penalty is death for all involved. Get out, Kieran said, his voice dropping to something deadly soft. I can't do that, Marcus gestured, and more guards filed into the room. Too many, Mara realized with growing dread. This wasn't a spontaneous confrontation. This was planned. As your beta, it's my duty to enforce pack law, even when you won't. Especially when you won't. Marcus! Kieran's power began to build, making the air thick and heavy. Stand down. That's an order from your alpha. An alpha compromised by impossible bonds. Marcus's attention moved to Mara with something that might have been regret. I'm sorry, truly. But I can't let sentiment destroy this kingdom. The law exists for a reason. If we allow one abomination to live, what's next? Where do we draw the line? Abomination? Kieran's control shattered. He moved faster than Mara could track, his hand wrapped around Marcus's throat, slamming him against the wall with force that cracked the stone. You dare call my mate an abomination? She's not your mate, Marcus choked out, even as his eyes began to glow with his wolf. Selene was your mate. This is a mockery, a trick meant to destroy you from the inside. Can't you see? The moment you choose her over the kingdom, you prove yourself unfit to rule. Other wolves began entering the chamber, nobles, council members, guards. They divided naturally into two groups, those who positioned themselves behind Kieran and those who moved to support Marcus. The palace was splitting before their eyes. The law is sacred, Councillor Aldrich said, his aged voice carrying authority. We cannot bend it for sentiment, not even for our king. To allow reincarnation magic to go unpunished sets a dangerous precedent. The moon goddess herself orchestrated this, Evangeline countered, her power flaring. I felt it in the magic. This isn't dark necromancy. This is divine intervention. Would you execute the goddess's will? Or convenient coincidence, another council member argued. Dark magic can mimic divine power. We have only the witch's word. My word as royal witch, Evangeline snapped. Unless you're questioning my loyalty to the crown? The argument escalated, voices rising, power building in the room as wolves let their dominance bleed into the air. Mara stood frozen in the centre of it all, watching her existence tear the kingdom apart. This was the plan. She could see it now with terrible clarity. They'd brought her back not to reunite her with Kieran, but to create exactly this situation, to force him to choose between his mate and his kingdom, to divide his court, to weaken him from within. And it was working perfectly. A commotion in the hallway made everyone fall silent. Running footsteps, then a guard burst into the room, his face pale with panic. Alpha King, Prince Ash, someone tried to take him from the nursery. There was an attack. Kieran moved like lightning, releasing Marcus and racing toward the door. Mara followed on instinct, her heart in her throat. Not Ash. Please, not Ash. They found the nursery in chaos. 2 guards lay dead, their throats torn out. The nursemaid was alive but unconscious. And Prince Ash? The young pup was pressed into a corner, his golden fur standing on end, his teeth bared in a snarl that would have been adorable if the situation weren't so dire. And standing over him protectively, bleeding from multiple wounds, was a white wolf Mara had never seen before. No, that wasn't true. She had seen this wolf, in Selene's memories, in visions of the past. This was Sarah, Selene's personal guard, her closest friend, who had died defending her the night she was murdered, or who was supposed to have died. The white wolf's head turned toward them, and Mara saw intelligence in those eyes, and recognition. The wolf shifted, bones cracking and reforming, until a woman stood there. She was perhaps 30, with silver scars crossing her face and arms. Her body, bearing the marks of torture, survived. "Alpha King," she rasped, her voice rough from disuse. "Forgive the intrusion, but I couldn't let them take your son the way they took your mate." "Sarah?" Kieran breathed, shock colouring his voice. "You're alive? We buried you. I saw your body." "You saw a body," Sarah corrected, swaying on her feet. "One they manipulated you into believing was mine. They kept me prisoner for 5 years, tortured me for information, tried to break me into betraying you." Her eyes moved to Mara, and something like wonder crossed her face. "But I felt it when she woke, felt my lady's soul returning to this world, and I knew I had to escape, had to warn you before they completed their plan." "What plan?" Marcus demanded, having followed them. His expression had shifted from righteous certainty to confusion. Sarah's attention moved to him, and something dark flickered in her gaze. "The plan you've been helping them with, Beta Marcus, though I suspect you didn't know the full scope of what you were enabling." The colour drained from Marcus's face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" Sarah limped forward, and now Mara could see the extent of her injuries. She was barely standing, had clearly fought through multiple attackers to reach Ash. "They promised to bring back your mate too, didn't they? Your sweet Elena, dead in childbirth. They showed you Selena reborn and said they could do the same for Elena. All you had to do was help them divide the kingdom, help them create chaos, help them weaken Kieran enough that he couldn't resist when they made their final move." "No," but Marcus's voice lacked conviction. They promised it was possible, that the magic that brought back Selene could bring back Elena, that all I had to do was ensure the law was enforced, that you betrayed your alpha?" Kieran's voice was deadly quiet. "That you worked with those who murdered my mate in the first place? Tell me, Marcus, did they also mention they're the ones who caused Elena's death? That they poisoned her during her pregnancy to make you desperate enough, grief-stricken enough, to fall for their lies?" Marcus's legs gave out. He fell to his knees, his face a mask of horror and realization. No, I didn't. I thought I was protecting the kingdom. Thought I was enforcing sacred law." "You were a pawn," Sarah said, without sympathy. "Just like Mara was meant to be. Just like all of us have been in this game." She turned back to Kieran. "The conspiracy runs deeper than you know. Someone in your inner court orchestrated everything. Selene's original death, her rebirth, the division of the palace, all of it. They've been planning this for years, waiting for the perfect moment to strike." "Who?" Kieran demanded. "Give me a name?" But before Sarah could answer, she stiffened. Her eyes went wide, and blood began trickling from her nose. "No, they found me. The binding spell. They're activating." She collapsed, convulsing. Evangeline rushed forward, her hands glowing with power as she tried to counter whatever magic was attacking the injured wolf. But it was too late. Sarah's eyes rolled back, and with a final shuddering breath, she went still, dead before she could reveal the traitor. The silence in the nursery was deafening. Prince Ash whimpered and ran to Mara, pressing against her legs. She scooped him up automatically, holding him close, feeling his little heart racing against her chest. Kieran's face had gone stone. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "The palace goes into lockdown. No one enters or leaves without my explicit permission. Guards on every door, every window, every possible exit. Evangeline, I want magical wards on all entrances. If someone in this court is a traitor, they're not escaping." "And her?" Marcus asked, still on his knees, his attention on Mara. His voice was hollow, broken. "What about the law? The precedent?" Kieran crossed the room in 3 strides. He took Ash from Mara's arms gently, passed him to a trusted guard, then turned back to face his court with Mara at his side. "I am Alpha King of the Crescent Moon Kingdom, he said, his power rolling through the palace in waves that made every wolf present drop their eyes in submission. I am the law, and I declare that Mara, Selena reborn, is under my absolute protection. Anyone who touches her, threatens her, or questions her right to exist answers to me personally. But the ancient law, someone started, can be changed, Kieran cut them off, by unanimous vote of the High Council or by direct decree of the Alpha King in times of crisis. I'm invoking the latter. We are at war, whether you see it or not. Someone has been manipulating us for years, killing our people, dividing our kingdom. They murdered Sarah to keep her from exposing them. They tried to murder my son tonight, and they orchestrated the death and rebirth of my mate to create exactly the chaos we're experiencing now. His hand found Mara's. Lacing their fingers together, the contact sent sparks of the mate bond, her visible in the air around them. I will not give them what they want. I will not choose between my mate and my kingdom, because my mate is part of this kingdom. She always has been. And if you can't accept that, if you truly believe ancient law is more important than justice and truth and the bonds the moon goddess herself creates, then you're welcome to challenge me for the throne. No one spoke. No one moved. The sheer force of Kieran's dominance, combined with the rightness of the mate bond visible to every wolf present, made argument impossible. I thought not. Kieran's expression softened fractionally as he looked at Marcus still kneeling. As for you, old friend, you've betrayed me. Betrayed your oath, your pack, everything we built together. By rights, I should execute you. Marcus closed his eyes, his face wet with tears. I understand. But you were manipulated by grief as they intended. Kieran's jaw clenched. They've made us all into weapons against each other, so instead of execution, I'm stripping you of your rank as beta. You'll be confined to quarters until we root out the real traitors. And then you'll spend the rest of your life making amends for the damage you've caused. Yes, Alpha, Marcus whispered. Guards moved forward to escort him away. As they passed Mara, Marcus stopped, looking at her with red-rimmed eyes. I'm sorry for everything. You saved his son, and I repaid you with accusations and hatred. I was so lost in my own grief, I couldn't see I was being used. I know, Mara said softly, and found she meant it. She understood grief, understood how it could twist someone into a weapon. I forgive you. Marcus's face crumpled, and he let the guards lead him away. The nobles and council members began filing out, muttering among themselves, but not openly defying their Alpha's decree. When the room had finally cleared except for Kieran, Mara and Evangeline, the tension finally broke. Kieran pulled Mara into his arms, burying his face in her hair. She felt him shaking, felt the absolute terror he'd been suppressing while maintaining his Alpha's mask. I almost lost you again, he murmured against her skin. When I heard about the attack, when I thought they'd come for you. I'm here, she whispered back, her own arms tight around him. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. I meant what I said. He pulled back just enough to look at her, his silver eyes blazing with determination and something fiercer, love that had survived death itself. I choose you. Kingdom, law, tradition, prophecy, I don't care. I choose you every time, always. Even if it destroys you, Mara asked, her voice breaking. Even if loving me tears this kingdom apart? Especially then. His hand cupped her face with devastating gentleness. Because you're not the thing that will destroy me, Selene. You're the thing that makes me strong enough to fight. You always have been. Evangeline cleared her throat delicately. I hate to interrupt, but we have a more pressing problem. Sarah died before revealing the traitor, yes, but she said something important, that this conspiracy has been building for years, which means we're looking at someone with immense patience, resources, and access to your inner circle. I know, Kieran's face hardened. Someone close enough to orchestrate Selena's murder 5 years ago, close enough to know about the prophecy that her power could be reborn. Close enough to manipulate Marcus, to send assassins after my son, to time everything perfectly. Someone who benefits from chaos, Mara added, her mind working through the implications. Who gains power from your weakness, who wants you distracted, divided, unable to defend your throne. They looked at each other, and Mara saw the same terrible realization dawning in Kieran's eyes that was forming in her own mind. Because there was only one person who fit all those criteria. Only one wolf with the access, the knowledge, the motive, and the patience to orchestrate a conspiracy spanning half a decade. But naming that person, accusing them, would shatter what remained of the kingdom's stability, would potentially start a civil war. We need proof, Kieran said finally. We need absolute, undeniable proof before we make accusations. Because once we do, there's no going back. Then we find proof, Mara said, steel entering her voice. She wasn't just Mara anymore, wasn't just Celine. She was both and more, a fusion of two lifetimes, two sets of strengths, two souls merged into something new. We find proof, we expose the traitor, and we end this, whatever it takes. Kieran smiled, and it was a wolf smile, all teeth and promise of violence. Whatever it takes, he echoed. He kissed her then, claiming her mouth with a hunger that spoke of 5 years of grief and loss and loneliness ending. The mate bond sang between them, finally acknowledged, finally accepted. When they broke apart, Mara could see the change in him, the way he'd let go of his guilt over loving her, the way he'd chosen to move forward rather than remain trapped in the past. But she could also see the Alpha King beneath the mate, the wolf who would burn kingdoms to ash to protect what was his, the predator who had been patient long enough. Evangeline, Kieran said, never taking his eyes off Mara. I need you to research every recorded case of reincarnation magic in the archives, every mention of divine resurrection, every prophecy involving rebirth. If someone used moon magic to bring Celine back, there will be traces in the old texts. Already on it, the witch replied. I'll have a full report by morning. Good. Kieran's hand found Mara's again, their fingers intertwining naturally, because we're about to go hunting. And when we find who did this, who murdered my mate, who corrupted my beta, who tried to kill my son, they're going to learn exactly why I'm called the most dangerous alpha in 5 generations. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. In the halls, wolves whispered about impossible bonds and ancient laws and the kingdom tearing itself apart. And somewhere in the palace, a traitor watched and waited, not yet knowing their carefully constructed conspiracy was about to come crashing down. Mara looked at Kieran, her mate, her king, her home in 2 lifetimes, and felt something settle in her chest. Purpose, determination, and beneath it all, a love that had literally transcended death itself. They had tried to make her a weapon to destroy him. Instead, they'd given him back the one person who made him unstoppable, and together, they were going to make every conspirator pay. Chapter 5. As the traitor's blade pierced through Kieran's chest, Mara felt her own heart shatter, and then something ancient and terrible awakened inside her, turning her eyes molten gold. The discovery had come too late. They'd spent 3 days searching for proof, digging through archives, questioning witnesses, following trails that went cold or looped back on themselves. Evangeline had found references to reincarnation magic in texts so old they crumbled at a touch, but nothing that pointed definitively to their traitor. Until Mara remembered, it had been a fragment of Celine's memories, surfacing at dawn while she lay in Kieran's arms. A conversation overheard years ago, dismissed as meaningless at the time. Ravenna, Kieran's beautiful, femme, ambitious sister, speaking in hushed tones with a hooded figure about removing obstacles and ancient prophecies and power that should have been mine. Mara had bolted upright, her heart racing. It's her. Gods, it's been her all along. Kieran had gone still beside her. Ravenna? That's impossible. She's my sister. My blood. She's also the one who was passed over for the throne, Mara had said, pieces falling into place with horrible clarity. Your father chose you because you were the son, the warrior, the one born with alpha power. But Ravenna was older. She was supposed to inherit until the council decided a female alpha was too radical, too dangerous to tradition. She'd watched the realization dawn in Kieran's eyes, watched him process the betrayal, his sister, his family. The one person he'd trusted absolutely because blood was supposed to be sacred. She was there the night Selena died, Kieran had whispered, his face going pale. She brought the wine to our table, said it was a special vintage, a gift from the southern vineyards. Celine drank first because Ravenna insisted, said it would be bad luck for me to taste it before my mate. The wine had been poisoned, by his own sister's hand. Now they stood in the grand hall, the entire court assembled for what Kieran had announced as an emergency session. Mara could feel the tension thrumming through the gathered wolves. Nobles, warriors, council members, all packed into the space, all watching with varying degrees of suspicion and curiosity. Ravenna stood near the throne, elegant as always, in deep purple silk. Her dark hair swept up to reveal the graceful line of her neck. She looked every inch the noble lady, concerned and supportive, playing the role of devoted sister perfectly. But Mara could see it now, the calculation in those emerald eyes, the way Ravenna's attention kept flickering to the exits, the subtle tension in her shoulders. She knew. Somehow she knew they'd figured it out. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, Kieran began, his voice carrying through the hall with alpha authority. He stood at the centre of the room rather than on his throne, Mara at his side. We've discovered the identity of the traitor who has been working against this kingdom for years. The wolf who orchestrated my mate's murder, who corrupted my beta, who kidnapped my son and sought to tear this kingdom apart from within. The crowd erupted in whispers. Ravenna's expression shifted to one of eager interest, playing her part. Brother, that's wonderful news. Who is this monster? Point them out so we can see justice done. Oh, I intend to, Kieran said, and something in his tone made the whispers die. The traitor is someone I trusted absolutely, someone I never thought to suspect because the bonds of blood and family seemed unbreakable. His eyes locked onto his sister's. The traitor is you, Ravenna. For a moment, no one breathed. Ravenna's face went through a fascinating journey, shock, then hurt, then a flash of fury before settling into confused dismay. Her acting was flawless. Kieran, what are you saying? This is madness. Is it? Evangeline stepped forward, her arms full of ancient texts and documents. Because I found something interesting in the old records. A purchase order for wolfsbane, nightshade and silverdust. Rare ingredients that would raise questions if bought openly. The order was placed 6 months before Selena's death, paid for through a shell account, delivered to a warehouse owned by a holding company, registered under a false name. She set the documents on a table, spreading them out. It took considerable effort to trace the ownership back through multiple layers of deception, but eventually all roads led to one person. You. Ravenna's mask slipped fractionally. Documents can be forged. Can they? Mara said, finding her voice. What about memories? Because I remember now. I remember you bringing the wine that night. Remember the way you watched Selene drink. The satisfaction in your eyes. You thought you'd hidden it well, but you weren't counting on those memories surviving death, were you? The ravings of an abomination, Ravenna snapped, her composure cracking. You're not even real, just some magical construct. She's real enough that you spent 5 years planning her rebirth, Kieran interrupted coldly. Real enough that you orchestrated the entire conspiracy around her. You murdered Selene because you knew she was my weakness, and then you brought her back, twisted and changed, hoping to force me into an impossible choice that would destroy me either way. Ravenna laughed, and the sound was bitter and sharp. You want proof? Fine, I'll give you proof. She spread her arms, her power suddenly flaring. Not alpha power, but something else. Something that tasted of dark magic and forbidden rituals. I killed your precious Celine, watched her choke on her own blood while you held her, watched you break as she died. It was beautiful, Kieran. Watching the great Alpha King reduced to a sobbing child, begging for a miracle that would never come. Gasps echoed through the hall. Several wolves moved to apprehend her, but Ravenna's power exploded outward, throwing them back. Symbols began to glow on her skin. Spell work, Mara realized with horror. She'd carved magical bindings directly into her flesh. Did you really think I'd come here unprepared? Ravenna's eyes blazed with madness and rage. I've spent 5 years planning this moment, 5 years building alliances, making deals, learning magic that would make your precious laws tremble. The Shadowfang Pack doesn't serve me out of loyalty, brother. They serve me because I promised them your kingdom on a silver platter. The doors burst open. Wolves in Shadowfang colours poured into the hall, dozens of them, heavily armed, moving with military precision. And at their head was Alpha Jonathan himself, a massive wolf with greying fur and eyes like chips of ice. A coup, Marcus breathed from where he stood under guard. She's staging a coup. Not staging, Ravenna corrected, her smile vicious, executing. Your guards are already overwhelmed, Kieran. My forces have taken the armory, the nursery, every strategic point in the palace. Surrender now, and I'll make your death quick. Resist, and I'll make you watch as I tear apart everything you love before I finally grant you the mercy of dying. Kieran's power erupted, meeting hers in a clash that made the walls shake. You threaten my family, my mate, my son. His voice dropped to something inhuman, his wolf bleeding into his words. I should have seen it before, should have recognized the poison in you. Our father was right to pass you over, not because you're female, but because you're rotten to your core. Our father was a fool, Ravenna shrieked. I was stronger, smarter, more capable in every way. But because I was born without a cock between my legs, I was deemed unworthy, told to smile and find a good mate and produce heirs, like some broodmare. Her magic lashed out, and wolves screamed as dark energy tore through the crowd. I am the rightful queen. This throne should have been mine. Chaos erupted. The Shadowfang wolves attacked, and Kieran's guards fought back. The grand hall became a battlefield, blood and magic and violence exploding in every direction. Mara found herself swept up in it, her body moving on instincts that came from both her lives. Celine's training and Mara's warrior reflexes combining into something fluid and deadly. She fought her way toward Kieran, who was engaged in brutal combat with Jonathan. The two alphas circled each other, all pretense of civilization stripped away, nothing but predators fighting for dominance. I've wanted this for 30 years, Jonathan snarled, his massive jaws snapping closed inches from Kieran's throat. Your kingdom? Your power, your mate. Ravenna promised me everything in exchange for my support. Then she lied, Kieran said, driving his claws into Jonathan's ribs, because when this is over, there will be nothing left of either of you but ash and memory. But Jonathan was old and cunning. He'd survived 3 decades of warfare through strategy, not strength. As Kieran pressed his advantage, the Shadowfang Alpha gave ground, leading him toward where Ravenna stood channeling her dark magic. Too late, Mara saw the trap. Kieran, no! Ravenna's hand shot out, and a blade of pure shadow materialized in her grip. She moved faster than thought, faster than Kieran could react, and drove the blade directly into his chest, punching through his sternum to pierce his heart. Time seemed to stop. Kieran's eyes went wide with shock. Blood bloomed across his shirt, spreading like a crimson flower. He staggered, his hand rising to the wound, incomprehension on his face. And Mara felt it, felt their mate bond convulsing. Felt his pain like it was her own, felt his heart stuttering and failing and stopping. No! The scream tore from her throat with a force that shattered windows. Something inside her broke. Not the fragile human thing she'd been pretending to be, but something ancient and primal that had been sleeping since before Selene was born, since before the kingdoms were founded, since the moon goddess herself walked among wolves. Her eyes exploded with golden light, not the pale amber of a normal wolf, but molten gold, pure and terrible and divine. Power erupted from her in waves that made every wolf in the hall drop to their knees, unable to stand against the sheer force of her presence. Memories flooded back. Not just Selene's life, but before that, before she was Selene. Before she was bound into a wolf's form and sent to walk among mortals with no memory of what she truly was. She was ancient. One of the first wolves, born when the moon goddess shaped the world and needed guardians for her creation. She was power incarnate, essence made flesh, a force of nature given consciousness and purpose. The Shadowfang wolves began to flee, terror overriding their orders. Even Ravenna stumbled back, her confidence crumbling in the face of what she'd awakened. "Impossible," she whispered. "You're just a reincarnation, a copy." "I am no copy," Mara said, and her voice resonated with harmonics that made reality itself shiver. "I am the original, the first, the one your ancestors whispered about in sacred texts you've long since forgotten." She moved toward Kieran's fallen form, and the crowd parted before her like water. Selene was my mortal incarnation, sent to guide and protect. Mara was my resurrection, my return to this world. But I am neither and both. I am what came before all of this. She knelt beside Kieran, gathering him into her arms. His blood soaked into her clothes, hot and slick, and his breathing had gone shallow and desperate. His eyes found hers, and she saw the love there, the fear, the resignation. "Don't you dare," she whispered, pressing her forehead to his. "Don't you dare leave me again." The mate bond between them was fraying, the connection that had survived death itself finally breaking under the weight of mortality. But Mara, no, the ancient who wore Mara's face, refused to accept it. She'd completed partial mate bonds before in both her lives, but never the full claiming, never the final step that would bind their souls together permanently. It required a sacrifice, a giving of self that few wolves were capable of. It required both mates to be willing to literally merge their essences, to become something greater than the sum of their parts. And it required power, massive, terrible power that could rewrite the fundamental forces of life and death, power she'd just remembered she possessed. "Forgive me," she murmured against his lips. "This is going to hurt." She kissed him, and golden light exploded from the contact. Their mate bond, severed and dying, suddenly blazed back to life, not just restored, but transformed, strengthened, made permanent. Mara poured her ancient power into Kieran, not just healing his wound, but fundamentally changing him, elevating him, making him strong enough to survive the full bond with an ancient. Kieran gasped, his back arching as divine power flooded his system. The wound in his chest began to close, flesh knitting together, heart repairing itself. But more than that, his own power grew, doubling, tripling, expanding until it matched hers in intensity, if not in nature. When she finally broke the kiss, they were both glowing with golden light. The mate bond between them was visible now, a cord of pure energy connecting heart to heart, soul to soul, unbreakable and eternal. Kieran stared at her with wonder and something like awe. "What did you do?" "Made you mine," she said simply, permanently, completely, in a way that transcends death, transcends time, transcends everything. She stood, pulling him up with her, and turned to face Ravenna. "Now, shall we finish this?" Ravenna had been trying to escape during the distraction, but Evangeline's magic had trapped her, binding her in place with silver threads of power. The traitorous sister struggled against her bonds, her face twisted with fury and disbelief. "You can't do this," she spat. "I'm of royal blood. I have rights." "You have nothing," Kieran said, his voice cold as winter. "You murdered your queen. You betrayed your kingdom. You tried to kill your own brother. What rights do traitors have?" "More than abominations," Ravenna shrieked, her eyes wild. "You stand there holding that thing, that magical construct, and dare to judge me. I should have been queen. The throne was mine by right of birth, by right of being the eldest, by right of being—" "Being what?" Mara interrupted. "Being bitter? Being jealous? Being willing to murder innocents to claim power you were never meant to have?" She shook her head. "You think you deserved the throne because of birth order? The throne isn't a birthright, Ravenna. It's a burden, a responsibility, and you've proven yourself completely unworthy of it." "Then execute me," Ravenna laughed, the sound unhinged. "Go ahead. Prove that you're no better than me, that you'll kill family for political convenience." "Oh, I won't kill you," Kieran said, and his smile was all teeth. "That would be too merciful. No. You're going to stand trial before the Council of Alphas. You're going to answer for every crime, every betrayal, every life you've destroyed, and then you're going to spend the rest of your very long life imprisoned, watching from a cell as everything you wanted slips further and further from your reach." He turned to his guards. "Take her to the dungeons. Maximum security. No visitors, no contact with the outside world. She is to be held until the council can be convened." As Ravenna was dragged away, still screaming curses and threats, attention turned to Alpha Jonathan. The Shadowfang leader had been wounded in the fighting, and now he knelt in a pool of his own blood, his forces either dead or fled. "And you," Kieran said, his power pressing down on the defeated Alpha, "you've been at war with my kingdom for 30 years. You've killed my wolves, attacked my territory, and now you've conspired with a traitor to overthrow my throne. Give me one reason why I shouldn't end you here and now." Jonathan's laugh was weak but genuine. "Because I can give you something better than my death. The complete surrender of the Shadowfang pack. Our territory, our resources, our loyalty, everything, in exchange for my life and the lives of my wolves who fought here today under false pretenses." "False pretenses?" Marcus, who'd been freed during the fighting to help defend the palace, stepped forward. "You came here willingly. You brought warriors to overthrow your Alpha King." "I brought warriors because Ravenna showed me proof, fabricated proof I now understand, that Kieran was planning to exterminate the Shadowfang pack, that he'd been building forces for a final assault that would wipe us from existence." Jonathan's eyes were bitter. "She played me as easily as she played you, Beta. Made me believe I was fighting for survival rather than serving someone else's vendetta." Mara felt the truth of his words through her expanded senses. Jonathan was many things. Ambitious, ruthless, willing to bend rules and break treaties. But he wasn't lying now. He'd been manipulated just like everyone else. "The Shadowfang pack surrenders," Kieran said slowly, testing the words. "Completely. No more raids, no more border skirmishes, no more 30 years of warfare." "Complete and absolute surrender," Jonathan confirmed. "We'll even accept integration if that's your demand. Let our packs merge, let the old grudges die with the old generation. End this cycle of violence that's consumed us both." The hall had gone silent. Every wolf present understood the magnitude of what was being offered. 30 years of war, ended in a single moment. Two of the most powerful packs in the region, united instead of divided. Kieran looked at Mara, a question in his eyes. She nodded slightly. This was his decision as Alpha King, but she could feel through their bond that he valued her input. "Accepted," Kieran said finally. "The Shadowfang pack will integrate with the Crescent Moon Kingdom under the following terms. Your wolves will be treated as full citizens, not conquered enemies. Your territory will be protected, your customs respected. But you, Jonathan, will step down as Alpha. Your second in command will take leadership of the Shadowfang contingent, reporting directly to me." "Agreed," Jonathan said without hesitation. I'm old and I'm tired of war. Let someone younger and wiser lead our people into whatever comes next. The treaty was sealed with a blood oath, witnessed by the entire court, and just like that, 3 decades of conflict ended. But there was still work to be done. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. The Council of Alphas was convened, and Ravenna stood trial for her crimes. The evidence against her was overwhelming. The documents Evangeline had uncovered, the testimony of witnesses, the magical signature on the reincarnation spell that matched her unique power. Even her own confession, given before the entire court, sealed her fate. The council sentenced her to life imprisonment, stripped of all titles and rights. Some had argued for execution, but Kieran had held firm. He would not kill his own sister, no matter how much she'd betrayed him. That small mercy would have to be enough. Marcus faced his own reckoning. He'd been manipulated, yes. But he'd still betrayed his Alpha's trust. The council offered him a choice, exile or service. He chose service, 20 years of penance, working to rebuild the kingdom he'd helped damage, earning back the trust he'd shattered. I don't deserve forgiveness, he'd said to Kieran and Mara during his sentencing, but I'm grateful for the chance to try to earn it anyway. And then there was the matter of the ancient law. Kieran stood before the full council of Alphas, Mara at his side, and made his case. The law forbidding reincarnation magic was outdated, written in a time when necromancy threatened to destroy the natural order. But Mara's rebirth hadn't been dark magic. It had been divine intervention, the moon goddess herself returning one of her ancient wolves to the mortal realm. I propose we abolish the blanket prohibition, Kieran said, his voice carrying across the assembly chamber, and instead judge each case on its individual merits, weigh the magic used, the intent behind it, the outcome. Mara's return has made our kingdom stronger, not weaker. It's ended a 30-year war and exposed a conspiracy that would have destroyed us from within. How can we call that an abomination? The debate had been fierce, but in the end, the council voted to change the law. Reincarnation magic would no longer be automatically punishable by death. Each case would be investigated, judged on its own circumstances. It was a victory, but also a beginning. The first step toward a more flexible, more nuanced approach to magic and law. The day after the council's decision, Kieran held a coronation ceremony, not for himself, he was already king, but for Mara. She stood in the throne room, wearing a gown of silver and gold, the entire kingdom assembled to witness her official recognition as Lunar Queen. Prince Ash sat at the base of the throne, his golden fur brushed until it shone, his amber eyes bright with excitement. Kieran placed the crown on her head, a delicate thing of moonstone and silver that had belonged to Selene, that had waited 5 years for its rightful wearer to return. When the crown settled into place, the mate bond between them flared brilliantly, visible to every wolf present. By the power vested in me as Alpha King, Kieran proclaimed, I recognize Mara, ancient returned, as my Lunar Queen, co-ruler of the Crescent Moon Kingdom, protector of our people and bearer of my mate's mark. All who serve me serve her. All who respect me respect her. She is my equal in all things, now and forever. The crowd erupted in cheers. Not everyone was happy. Change never pleased everyone. But the majority had accepted her, accepted that their queen had been returned to them, however impossibly. That night, as the celebrations continued in the halls below, Mara found herself on the palace balcony, watching the moon rise. She felt Kieran approach before she heard him, their bond making them constantly aware of each other's proximity. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. Regrets? He murmured against her hair. None, she said honestly, though I never imagined my life would lead here. Either life. She turned in his arms to face him. I'm both of them now, you know. Both Mara and Selene. I remember growing up as a rogue, serving in the Shadowfang pack, being slowly poisoned by false memories. And I remember being Celine, being your mate, ruling at your side. I remember dying and being reborn. I remember everything. Does it hurt? His hand cupped her face with infinite gentleness, holding all those memories, all those lives. Sometimes, she admitted, but mostly it feels right, like I was always meant to be this. The sum of both experiences, both lives, both loves. Mara gave me strength I didn't have as Selene, and Celine gave me wisdom I lacked as Mara. Together they make me whole. Then I'm grateful for both of them, Kieran said, for the warrior who saved my son, and the queen who ruled at my side, and the ancient who brought them together into the woman I love more than life itself. A soft yip from the doorway made them both smile. Ash padded onto the balcony, no longer content to let them have a moment alone. The young prince had been inseparable from Mara since the coup, as if afraid she might disappear if he let her out of his sight. Mara knelt, gathering him into her arms. He licked her face enthusiastically, then pulled back, his amber eyes solemn. "Ma," he said clearly, the first word he'd spoken in human tongue. "Ma." Mara's breath caught. Kieran's hand found her shoulder, squeezing gently. "Yes, baby," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm your ma. I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. I promise." Ash curled against her, content and safe, and Mara held him close, marvelling at the perfect trust of a child who'd been through so much but still believed in love and protection. "There's something else," Kieran said after a moment, his voice odd. "Evangeline completed her examination of you this morning, the one to ensure the reincarnation magic didn't leave any lingering damage." Mara looked up, hearing something in his tone. And she found something. He knelt beside her, his hand moving to rest on her stomach. "You're pregnant, Mara, about 6 weeks along, conceived during the blood moon, when we first completed the mate bond." The world seemed to stop. Mara's hand covered his, pressing against where their child was growing, so small and new and perfect. "Pregnant," she breathed. "We're having a baby." "We're having a baby," Kieran confirmed, and his smile was brilliant, joyous, free from the shadows that had haunted him for 5 years. "Ash is going to be a big brother." The pup in her arms seemed to understand, his tail wagging so hard his entire body shook. He pressed his nose against her stomach, sniffing curiously, then yipped with delight. They stayed like that for a long moment, a family united on a balcony overlooking a kingdom at peace. 3 lives bound together by love stronger than death, by bonds that transcended time and magic and fate itself. The sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Mara watched the dawn break over the kingdom, her kingdom now, and felt something settle deep in her soul. She was home, not as Mara or as Selene, but as both, as herself, complete and whole, and exactly where she was meant to be. She'd died and been reborn, lived 2 lives and merged them into one. She'd been a warrior and a queen, a victim and a survivor, lost and then found again. She'd faced impossible choices and made them, survived betrayals and forgiven them, fought for love and won it. And now, with Kieran's arms around her and his son pressed against her side and their child growing beneath her heart, she finally understood what the moon goddess had known all along. Some loves are too powerful to be contained by a single lifetime. Some bonds are meant to transcend death itself. Some souls are destined to find each other again and again, no matter how many lives it takes, no matter what obstacles stand in their way. She'd been returned to him because they were meant to be together, not in one life, but in all of them. Past, present, and future. Forever. "I love you," she whispered, not sure if she was speaking to Kieran or to Ash or to the child she carried or to all of them at once. "I love you too," Kieran murmured against her hair. in this life and every life, in this world and the next. Always. The sun continued to rise, bathing them in golden light, and in the palace below, a kingdom celebrated its queen, the one who died and returned, the one who'd saved them all, the one who'd proven that love could survive anything, even death itself. The end. Thank you for listening to this story. Like, share, and subscribe for more.